This is Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you are welcome. You know the drill. Please subscribe, rate, comment, share, reach out, tell your friends, send smoke signals, whatever. We love your feedback and we want to hear from you. Our sponsor this week is BridgetPhetasy.com, a lovely place for all Phetasy-related merch. This week we have Nathan Edmondson. He's an American writer known for the comic series Who is Jake Ellis and The Activity for Image Comics, as well as The Punisher and Black Widow for Marvel Comics. He is also the co-owner of Allied Special Operations Experience Company and the co-founder of EDGE, Ecological Defense Group Incorporated, a nonprofit devoted to the innovative conservation of African wildlife. And we do talk about his writing, but we really get into his conservation work in Africa. It's fascinating how he got into it. It's a little bit heartbreaking and also just eye-opening in terms of what we as normies just sitting here in traffic or in America doing our dishes can do to help in a situation that sometimes feels helpless. So listen up. I'm here with Nathan Edmondson, president of EDGE, correct?
That's right.
Writer. Tell us what you do. Tell us about yourself.
I'm the president of EDGE and a writer.
Okay. I did something right in the first 2 minutes.
I'm a writer of things like comics and screenplays and soon to be some books. And then most of my effort now, though, is running the nonprofit EDGE.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about EDGE.
So EDGE is we're based here in Los Angeles primarily. We are devoted to the innovative preservation of African wildlife. So we are a counter-poaching and conservation organization.
Mm-hmm.
We work mostly in South Africa, but we're not limited to South Africa. We're doing some other things in sub-Saharan Africa, especially with the rhino war. So elephant and rhino poaching and preservation, and look at developing community efforts, bringing new technologies, and then using U.S. special operations tactics and expertise to develop counter-poaching initiatives. So, yeah, that's what.
So how did you, a writer who's done comics and television shows, end up doing this?
So, it's a kind of been a bit of a weird journey.
We like weird journeys here on Walk-Ins Welcome.
Yeah.
That's what we're all about.
I had some background where I did a little bit of work kind of tangentially with the special operations community. And so I had friends there and was aware of some things going on. And we had a business we put together in Las Vegas where we were working and doing some training and some things. So I was doing that concurrently with writing after I'd moved out to LA to, keep pursuing, writing fiction, writing books, writing all this. And then I heard about, and I'm trying to remember, I had a friend call me and tell me there were some guys from this community who were doing some counter-poaching work, and I thought it was. I was just interested. I didn't really have. I love animals. I love wildlife, but it really wasn't on my sort of docket to get over to Africa and do any kind of work.
So these are just like retired special ops guys?
Yes. Basically, well, in this.
Or are
case,
they just like guys in America who want to be special ops guys?
We're very, we are co-founded with and, run by guys from very specific, with very real backgrounds.
Okay. I'm just imagining like a bunch of dudes who played video games who were like, we're going to go save the rhinos.
Well, there is plenty of that actually. We get those emails and, even guys who say, hey, I have this background or I served, and they may have a very legitimate military resume. I want to go kill some poachers. Well, that's not what we do.
Right.
And the guys who have tried to do that, it usually doesn't end up going very well. So, the value of working with guys at the level that we do is they're non-imperialistic. They go over there and spend more time listening than talking, and
Right.
slowly develop, the plans and solutions. So, we are very fortunate in kind of the way we were founded. Well, anyway, to get back to that part of the stories, I heard about some guys over there. I went over just to kind of check it out. I think looking for a story.
Yeah.
But I just sort of went because why not?
Why not? We're writers.
Yeah.
We got to do it.
And getting to go. So anyway, I end up in Kruger National Park, and I don't think I could have pointed to it on a map before going, but it's literally the front lines of poaching in Africa right now, the front lines of the Rhino War. And coming out of that experience, we realized that these efforts that these guys were doing kind of on contract didn't have longevity. Like there was no plan to sustain these, move forward. So I talked with the people involved, and we ended up founding EDGE, the Eco Defense Group, to carry these efforts on. So what's unique about us is that unlike somebody who did wake up and say, I want to go save the rhinos, you end up running over there, but nobody's asked you. It's like, well, thank you. Please hand us some money. Or, so we weren't founded out of, we were founded out of need.
Right.
We weren't founded out of a bunch of people, out of a cause. Like we got together and said, we're going to go save rhinos. We found ourselves in the right place at the right time to make a difference and bring some really badly needed solutions, and in a position. So in a way, we were sort of handed, a Formula One race car, and then said, the keys are handed to me and said, now figure out how to drive it.
Right.
So, yeah. So, and since then, I've just been learning everything possible about the world. We have really extraordinary access, great partners, and I spend a lot of time over there now. And then the rest of my time is spent, I guess, fundraising and building a coalition and sort of trying to develop some projects.
So what were some of the most surprising things that you learned as somebody who's just basically a normie and entered into the world about poaching? Maybe some of the myths that aren't true, or some of the things that you never would have expected that are true.
I think the thing that reached out and grabbed me the most, and this is not something that most tourists would be exposed to, which is part of how unique my first experience was, is being in is seeing those whose life, they live this life. They live in the park. These
are anti-poachers. Who's they, I guess.
Well, what I mean is that there is a part of the world for whom this doesn't exist on TV. It literally is their backyard. Conservation is a little bit different, for example, from here to say, well, we want to protect elephants, right?
Right.
And to them to say, but I want to drive my car and have this street and have a fence and have a garden, but if you're there and you have a garden and you're living in an area with elephants, you can't become too attached to the fence.
Right.
Because the only other thing you can do is shoot the elephant.
Right.
So, it's living in this world. To me, I think my eyes are just open to realize, like, wow, this is not something that just exists on safari. This is part of somebody's life.
Backyard.
And so that, struck me in a way, and I said, I want to support these people, and I'm envious. I want some of this life.
Right.
And also that they literally risk their lives. I mean, we have these, there's a number of areas we're working to protect in Limpopo through a security initiative, and we left a couple guys. They have this reserve. There's about 100 rhino on it, and we left it in a full moon when we flew out. And there's not, we're kind of just hoping and praying that a gang of well-armed poachers don't show up, because if they do, it's all over. And so, like, in some of these senses, we go over there and we think, oh, we're doing great work, but it becomes very real when you're sitting on the plane headed back thinking, yeah, this trip may be over for us for this week, but for them, literally every night under full moon is like, is a night that you hope both the animal and and its protectors live through the night.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the other thing that struck me was, I think the marketing, we even see this when we were talking to some PR people in South Africa recently for this Red Bull thing we did. They said, people are really jaded. They're tired of hearing about how bad the poaching crisis is, but give them something positive, to embrace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that most of the world is that way. I mean, the media didn't even talk about the last male, the last male of the northern white rhino dying, which means that species, that subspecies is extinct.
I saw it. I mean, I did see the media talk about it, but
only after it was a fait accompli, right?
Right.
The time to have cared about it would have been
Right.
when there were about 30 animals left and it could have been repopulated.
Right.
So, in that sense, like extinction is very final and it's very real. And when you're looking there, literally seeing as the rangers are coming in, we found 2 more carcasses, we found another orphan bait, this and this, and it's like, the clock is ticking and it's ticking really quickly. So it became very, very tangible and real to me, this idea that we're marching towards extinction with, or to quote, the title of the excellent Luis Ahoyo series, Racing Toward Extinction. And you can see it, you can see it in the rounds expended, the brass found, and the carcasses that the vultures circle with the rhinos every day over there.
What are the numbers?
Without it in front of me, I'm going to be a little weak, but basically there was a rhino war in the 70s, 80s, and then the numbers became strong again until around 2006, 2007, partly due to the increase in cancer rates in Southeast Asia, and the return of traditional Chinese medicine. Other things drove the demand for rhino horn.
Is that what they use it for?
Yeah, it's both a virility aid or a cancer cure.
Does it actually work?
No, it's keratin. It's like your fingernails. So it has no value other than the perceived and traditional, and traditional Chinese medicine is kind of making a comeback,
right?
And especially in like white collar, circles. So the numbers exploded, and I think right now it's about 3 a day. Rhino were killed in South Africa alone. There's something like less than 2,500 black rhino left in the world, less than 10,000 white rhino, and you can basically set a clock to the extinction of both right now.
Wow.
And which is absurd, because literally you can solve this problem. There's enough money and resources in the world to solve this problem overnight, but the reality is that it's very difficult. It's very complicated. It's very corrupt, and rhino horn right now is the most valuable material on the planet, ounce for ounce, worth more than diamonds, heroin, platinum, and all. And of course that's just talking about rhinos. Now rhinos are an umbrella species in most of Africa, so if you protect them, you protect everything else. Like obviously as you head north, elephants are more in target, but rhino, lion, elephant, pangolin are all being hunted to extinction, or poached rather.
And I guess from my perspective, and I think what I don't know that people are jaded or cynical. I feel like that's the wrong impression. I think people feel helpless. I don't think it's like a jaded, I don't care. I think it's a feeling. My perception from my friends and people I talk to, and I know myself, even hearing this, it's like, what can you even do?
Right.
It feels so far away, and I feel very helpless to do anything other than have a conversation with somebody like you and give you a voice and give people that you work with money and resources. But as just a lay person, I think you're subjected to, our generation in general. I think we're around the same age. We were that generation that grew up with all the starving orphan, ads that were on constantly of the babies. And I think you get desensitized to it.
Right.
It feels far away. I sponsor 3 kids, and people always make fun of me for it because there's this whole anti kind of NGO. I think if people are cynical, they're cynical about NGOs. They're cynical about the nonprofit organizations. I was working on farms up north, and the stories people told me about Greenpeace and the other organizations about like big NGO, as they called it,
right.
They do make you kind of jaded about how, well, if I get, am I helping? And people have such a horrible impression of PETA. I mean, it just feels like and one of the questions we got on Twitter actually was, and I'll just ask it now since we're here, is how does a normie like myself or somebody just sitting in America help?
Yeah. Well, a lot to unpack there, but I think you're essentially right. And I don't want to get into the weeds of sort of this organization is effective, this one isn't. And I don't always think it's necessarily that simple, but certainly when NGOs grow to a certain size, it's very difficult to, as a donor, right, to see where your dollars go. And then there's an infrastructure that grows, which capacity is important for NGOs. And, it used to be that donors didn't understand that as well as they do now. That is that people have to be paid in order to do the work. But I think that you want, as one of the pieces of advice I got when starting on this was to treat every donor as an investor. That especially when you're talking about people who are high net worth, but even down to the $50, $500 donors, to say, okay, you have to give money to charity this year. You gave money to charity last year. What was your return on that investment? Where did your dollars go? What did you see? And ultimately, what did you feel? And so one of the issues, people feeling helpless sitting at home is that and that was the case with me too, is it took me going over there to feel a connection. And not just to feel a connection, but to feel like, oh, and here is literally somebody asking me for help on the ground. Here's how you can continue to help us. It wasn't, and we hear it all the time. There's people over there working on the ground, working on the front lines, and some NGO will come over and say, here, we want to give you money and resources for this. And they're kind of like, okay, thanks. Because they don't want to turn it away, but
it's not what they need.
And it's not what they asked for.
This you hear a lot about Americans or even just organizations coming into a community, and it's not actually helpful.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too critical because there's many that are.
Oh, obviously. No, totally.
But I think for somebody looking to find how they can help and feel a part of it, you have to find a group that you understand, that you feel a connection to. And so I think that one of the things that we try to do is really bridge that gap.
Right.
Marketing is important, but it's not just about sort of singing the song and dancing the dance. It's about really connecting people and helping them to understand, like in our case, like, hey, this is what we have been asked to do. And here's the solution we're going to deliver, to the problem that's been presented to us. And so, and sometimes that's like in one of the parks, we were asked, can you build playgrounds? But the development of the youth in that community is hugely important because they're literally on the front lines of the Rhino War. And so as part of that, we said, okay, we want to do that. Now, what are some things we can put in that playground? And also we started a photography and art club with them, to help them to look at the wildlife in their backyard in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
So, the goodwill that we build, the just kind of giving them something to enjoy in that world that they can look at. All of that is important, that we are becoming a part of that community in a way. So anyway, to answer your question in terms of what people can do, like the obvious easy thing is money, right? All of this has a cost. All of it is expensive.
Right.
We do need donation. We need money. We need support. But I don't like to sort of accept a donation. I like to build a relationship.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to burn out if I'm chasing
dollars.
Yeah, I'd rather have somebody who knows what we're doing, who understands it, and also some of the stuff is difficult for us to advertise, especially when you're bringing elite military and things like that. And it's hard to we do a pretty good job because we have excellent photographers and videographers, but some of it is a little hard to advertise. If I get somebody on the inside who understands, but I would say if somebody sort of wakes up and says, it just hit me that this species will be extinct in our lifetime if I do nothing, and I don't want that to happen on my watch.
Right.
Then I would say two things. One, educate yourself and also understand that there's a lot of bullshit out there.
Right.
And then two, which means educate yourself by talking to the front lines, talk to people who are there, or at least hear from people who are there. And then, and then be very discerning with your money. So look at, the big organizations do things that only big organizations can do.
Right.
World Wildlife Fund can do things that nobody else can do. Right. And they are going to work with partners that only work with, somebody their size. But if you look at somebody like us, we will never grow to that size. That's not sort of in our, that's not in our DNA. You can say, okay, I really care about this aspect of it. And I want to have a real clarity of vision in seeing how my dollars are used effectively. And then not only do you have the satisfaction then, but you've become invested in the evolution of this cause.
Right.
Because now you can say, when somebody else says to you, say, here's what I've done and here's why it's working. Now you're informed, now you're part of it, and you're no longer disconnected. So I would say, again, treat it like an investment.
When you say there's a lot of bullshit out there, how do you weed through all that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it is very easy to become imperialistic in conservation work. And I think that a lot of the partners we talk to over there, there's a little bit of fatigue of people coming in telling us how to do what they do. And, in that way, it kind of, the way it hits the media, the way it's sort of marketed can be, this is how we want to solve this cause, rather than this is how they want this, this is how they need us to work with them. Without getting, again, too in the weeds in it, that's kind of an abstract answer. But I think that, I think I read as much source material as you can from the ground, rather than stuff that is filtered through the,
media,
people on Twitter that you follow, right? So I, like anything, like go see what it's, go see what it's, what the word is from there. I mean, one of the things that we've done, recognizing this problem, and this is fairly shameless, but I also think that this has become an important part of our cause, is we launched a podcast.
Right.
So I think we're 8-9 episodes in this week. So it's the Edge Conservation Podcast. And part of it was because, and now it's grown beyond Africa, right? It's conservation doers, the top conservationists around the world that we can find. A woman who's working with penguins in Antarctica, somebody working in the Congo with coffee, but there's also a lot of people that we're talking to in Africa. And the reason is we meet all these people and recognize that, we are not the solution to every problem, but if we can be a bit of a platform for them, then I think that it helps us with a holistic approach, because we're constantly hearing and broadcasting, whether in some we don't agree with, some we're learning from, and that we're taking those voices directly from the ground and giving them a platform, because we realized there's nothing like that. Exactly what you're saying. Like, how do I go and get that info?
Yeah.
We said, well, we'll go get it for you. And it's unfiltered. We just put that person straight up. This isn't, the Edge version of them, or just exactly what you're doing here. It's just interviews with people doing radical, lifelong wildlife conservation.
Right.
So that's been helpful to me. Like, every new one that I listen to, I'm learning. And I'm learning things about. There was one we had for this amazing woman, Jessica Babbage, who is in one of our areas of operation and runs this group called Save the Waterberg Rhino. I've met her, I've talked to her, I'm inspired by her, but when I listened to her episode, I learned a lot about how to approach things over there. It really has informed the way I'm waking up at 3:30 a.m. to start doing my work, Yeah, so I mean, that's something that we recognize, in other words, that is
a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I wouldn't even know when you say, and I hear this a lot from people who are experts, and even people in journalism, they'll be like, you just got to weed through the bullshit. I'm like, well, okay, how do I know it's bullshit if I don't know? And I'm like you, I generally try to go to source. I follow, for instance, there's the Ebola crisis is going on over there, and I follow a doctor on Twitter on the ground over there, and she's so informed. It's so, the way it gets translated from what I read from her to the media is when you see those. So I always tell people to kind of seek out. Twitter is a great resource if you know how to use it. Right. So you can seek these people out directly, and like the people who are on your podcast, for example, and you can stay up to date by just following them on Twitter.
Sure.
I'd like to take a quick break so we can talk about our sponsor. Is your woke friend annoying? Have you been canceled? Do you want a blue check and feel you deserve one? Do you watch Dumpster Fire and enjoy all of the catchphrases? Well, you can get all of your merch needs for Phetasy at BridgetPhetasy.com. Shirts, hoodies, mugs, and canceled neck gaiters. There's a whole bunch of new stuff and a lot of old goods you probably never even noticed before. We also have beanies, sweatshirts, and oft request capitalism always wins mugs and hoodies. Just go buy some stuff and support your favorite podcast. We'll have walk-ins welcome merch coming soon. That's at BridgetPhetasy.com. BridgetPhetasy.com.
I remember when I was studying art history, and one of the emphasis from my professor was emphasis. One of the things that was often emphasized was all of our research had to be primary source. So, and that in art history, that's it's
not
history,
easy.
it's very difficult. But once you start to get into that rhythm and realize what it means to look for it, one of the things that struck me though in that in those classes was that there's an answer to everything. So when people are like, talking about the construction of the pyramids and the great mysteries of the Mayans, actually, there's answers to most of that, but you have to know how to sift through and seek it. And I think that there's a lot of people with a lot of solutions on the ground who live literally with elephants trampling their fence every day. And if you just listen to them, they're going to tell you what works and what doesn't. Here's an example. Our partner over there, the Roy Hintzman Conservation Research Unit, they have these 8 wonderful elephants that we interact with that were rescued from culling and provide amazing opportunities for research. And they're really unique in that, normally to interact up close with an elephant, or not normally, but very often it's there's some abuse. The animal, especially in Asia, they've been captured. They've been, in this case, they were raised and have served in counter-poaching and other just extraordinary behavior research. And there was. I was talking to Sean Hintzman, who's also on our podcast over there, when people were talking about the beehive solution to elephants. So stepping back a little bit, elephants are a continent-wide problem for Africa. They're perceived by many on the ground to just be a nuisance, a pest. They're destructive.
Like deer.
Yeah, they're
the deer of Africa.
They can step on your car, right?
Yeah.
So and all
they're not going to eat your garden,
but they will kill you,
right?
People die, so they call it human-elephant conflict. Is a big problem. So especially because they've cut up what would otherwise be the very wide natural areas, and now they're relegated to reserves and parks where they become overcrowded. So elephant management is a bit of a crisis right now.
Right.
So finding solutions to human-elephant conflict is an ongoing issue. How do you stop humans and elephants from crossing into each other? And for a farmer who says, I need to feed my family, my town, I have this garden, and this elephant comes and eats everything, and I can't feed my family, it's easy for him. I shoot the elephant.
Right.
Or I don't want him to stumble on, and then my kid's out there and he kills my kid because he spooked him and tramples him, or something. Like, this is an issue where it's fairly simple for the farmer. It's also fairly simple for the elephant. That smells good. I want that.
Right.
I'm going to get it, and nothing gets in my way. So one of the solutions that was advertised was beehives. It was like, if you put beehives up, elephants don't like bees. It keeps them away from the farms. And I knew one group who granted a huge amount of money into investing in beehives for this. So I was talking with Sean. I said, have you heard of this? Like, what is the deal? He says, well, let me tell you what I think. He said, say that you have a 7,000 hectare farm, right? You would need beehives every, I don't know, however many meters, right? 5 meters at least. That means that the number of beehives you need for that farm are probably 10,000 times the natural population of bees for the year.
Right.
Also, elephants are very active at night and bees aren't. So he said, I don't see this as being effective. If you had just come to people on the ground who, they probably could have told you. Another one was chili peppers. People say, if you can dust chili peppers, you'll keep elephants off of things. He went and he got the elephants love oranges. So he took oranges, went to his elephants, and he injected them, dusted them, rolled them in chili pepper, nothing stopped those elephants from eating. So he could very easily say, like, these are not actual solutions, and yet a lot of money, a lot of, tweeting, a lot of look at this wonderful organic way to stop elephants went around. But, and I could be wrong. There may be some areas where it was effective, but I know in that conversation, it was like, this is not a real solution.
Right. So. This is such an interesting point too, about how, even poaching, when you really can't talk about poaching without talking about, a lot of this seems like desperation. It's not like they want to go poach these rhinos. I don't think they're just waking up being like, I love killing rhinos. It seems like it's born out of necessity. And so I feel like, you can address the problem of poachers, but how do you address it without addressing the systemic conditions that create the need to poach? Right.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that we do the art, photography, gardening, and other community things, because I don't believe you can work on one side of the fence and not the other. If the community doesn't support it, then it's kind of like you can police the gangs in Chicago, but unless you're actually
working with the gangs,
and the communities and the kids and churches, right. You're just going to replace the ranks. First of all, I think there's maybe two especially different kinds of poaching. One is poaching, animals off of farms for food. We need the meat, they're killing it. But the bigger epidemic obviously is killing for ivory or for horn or lion paws or whatever they're doing. And in that case, absolutely. I mean, the financial incentive to go kill a rhino, like for
it's worth
months
the risk.
And months of salary, it's absolutely worth the risk. Most of the wildlife to most communities in areas with a poaching crisis are frankly, they're worth more dead than alive. It's that simple.
Right.
Elephants, they're free. If you go over there, people are giving elephants away. The problem is nobody will take them.
Right.
Right. Rhino, nobody wants to take on a rhino right now. It's too much of a liability. You take on it's a huge security risk. Your family may be killed. Your security now has to be upped in extraordinary ways. So just on that side, the cost exceeds whatever the value may be. And then to the potential poacher, right? And then there's it's the same, like the financial incentive, like what good is this animal to them? What are they getting out of it? Now, if you have tourism jobs, for example, where I'm employed by a place that gets tourism because people come on safari with these animals, right? There's a value. And if you say, okay, tourism supports this community, the other thing you can do, and Jessica talks about this much more eloquently than I could in her episode on the podcast, is that if you can connect to the communities, the fact that poaching is part of drugs, part of arms trafficking, part of human trafficking, kidnapped kids and poached animals are part of the same syndicates and enterprise, you can get the community to start to resist some trends that way too. So education works on that front. We put about 30 or 40 kids on safari vehicles. Probably took them about 5 kilometers from where they lived to see rhino and paint. We had a famous artist, Rob Pryor from here in LA, came over and he taught the kids to paint the elephants and rhinos, brought them art supplies. All those kids got out and I asked them, how many of you have ever seen a rhino before? 2 of them raised their hand. 5 kilometers. We flew 20,000 miles over, went down there, saw them that morning at breakfast. They came 5 kilometers, and had never seen one before.
I mean, you'd be shocked at how many people have never been to Joshua Tree who were born in LA.
Absolutely. Right. So and if Joshua Tree was being deforested due to whatever conditions, it asks people to care who haven't been there. But if you've been there, so to these kids, I would hope to say that those kids, after sitting in front of those animals, painting them, thinking about them, now they see it as something different than just this abstract way to get paid. And I think that little efforts like that will slowly start to invite the next generation into a conservationist mindset rather than, that will deter them from being as easily recruited as poachers. So anyway, that's a circuitous response to your simple observation. But yeah, I absolutely think that you have to convince, and not just convince, but make real the value. If an elephant is going to be cold, if it's got to be cold, right, or a rhino has to be cold, like that money goes to support all kinds of things that they badly need money for in conservation. But if there's an option to take that animal, and there's a huge cost, associated with it, and this is where money comes in, right? If say there's an older rhino bull that nobody can keep, and as they get older, they'll attack the younger virile males, which means you can
That's
hurt
bad.
breeding rhinos. So. And so to a lot of people, they say, we have to cull it now, because this is the only way to grow the species. It would be wonderful if you had an investor who wanted to invest in the infrastructure, the security, the tourism elements, everything to take that rhino and make it ambassador for the species.
Right.
Big Bear Alpine Zoo, just here outside of LA, with Bob Cisneros. That's what they are. They are a rehab and ambassador zoo. So the animals that can't be rehabbed and put back in the wild become ambassadors for their species. And Bob is extremely knowledgeable in the difference between sort of pinning up an animal for entertainment and what it means to be an ambassador. And I think that it's hugely expensive, but I think that you can, like the Adventures with Elephants Enterprise and others, make animals ambassadors in ways that, they have a new value that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So that's something I would love to see more of, but it's hard to go over there and tell somebody to do it and not give them the money to make it happen.
Right. And is there a way to, why doesn't the international, I mean, I know China probably just doesn't give a fuck, but why doesn't the international community pressure China to not want rhinos? Isn't there a way you can pressure the people who are encouraging the demand for this?
You can, and it's happening. There's a few issues. One is there's a lot of corruption in the ranks all over. China literally
doesn't give
September.
a fuck.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have very kind things to say, but guys,
there's just so many people, I guess, too. If there's a demand for rhino in China, it's not like a small country. Well, if there's a demand for rhino in China, it could be like 20 million people.
Well,
a small demand.
Yeah, I mean it's been hugely legitimized, and you're talking about thousands of years of tradition.
And it's just like pseudoscience.
It's not even pseudoscience. It's literally just
fake
folklore or
it's
something.
It's like horoscopes.
Yeah, but they in September said that they were going to lift the ban on the import of rhino horn and ivory. China did as a nation, which is huge. And then the international community sort of put pressure on them, and they said, okay, well, we're going to delay doing that.
Okay.
So yeah, they have no interest as at least as a government in doing anything to stymie, rhino poaching.
What are they going to do when they run out of rhinos?
They'll move on to the next thing. I mean,
isn't it the rhino that they want? Yeah. Wouldn't it be in their best efforts? Like, isn't it? It doesn't make sense to me that if this is something that you can say there's a finite countdown. China knows this. Wouldn't it be in their interest to be breeding these things?
Well, and there are efforts like in South Africa, it's legal to trade and harvest rhino horn in the country because you can harvest it harmlessly. Mm-hmm. I'm not a fan of the practice, but if it gives somebody a reason to keep and breed rhino, I'm all for it. Mm-hmm. But you can remove a rhino's horn without hurting him. It's just not the way poachers do it, for a couple of reasons. One being that it takes longer. Mm-hmm. They just hack and go. The other being that the few ounces that are beneath the bones of the face are not worth leaving behind. Mm-hmm. So if you really wanted to, but it's a black market machine, and you can't really. It's kind of like the drug war in the U.S. You can't sort of just even legalizing the trade and doing it that way. I don't believe changes poaching. I don't.
Right. I don't mean legalizing it. I just mean it's not like a black market where there is a infinite amount of heroin or cocaine being produced at any given moment all over the world.
Right.
There's 25, there's a certain number of rhinos.
But the demand actually, I think, rises the more rare it becomes because then it's more precious.
Right.
Right. And it's more special that you got
right.
it. And it's
right.
more likely to cure your cancer. And God, what?
So is it primarily wealthy people who are buying this?
It's both. There's an excellent, actually two things I'd recommend people watch. One is the documentary from the filmmaker Susan Scott and Bonnet de Bod called Stroop, Stroop, which means to poach, to strip. It's just hitting streaming platforms right now. I think it's won about every award. They show every aspect of the rhino.
Oh, cool.
Trade. It's heartbreaking and awesome and undercover. Also, later today, I'm going to see meet Paul Blackthorne, the actor and activist who did Save the Rhino Vietnam, a mini doc, and he went over and went on the front lines in Vietnam, which is the primary conduit where most rhino horn is distributed.
Interesting.
Although they just caught a guy, let's see, he was headed to Dubai with I think 70 kilo of horn, and then he was going to try from Dubai to get it into Asia. So they're using different routes now that they're monitored. But the point is, those two do an excellent job of showing the end users.
Interesting.
And it's in markets. There's a jewelry element to it, but I think it's both white collar and local traditional like fishing villages from. So and then there's a lot of international tourists who come in and want to buy it.
Right.
So and they're now finding it in Russia. I'm not sure that I have a clear picture on what ivory and rhino horn are doing in Russia right now, but what the markets are. But yeah, I mean, this is, they've been, poached and used and turned into jewelry and all of this, both ivory and horn for, thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
So it's not like, when you talk about turning the tide on it, like it's a tidal wave you're standing against. It's really, really tricky.
But this is again where the helplessness comes in,
right? And I mean, I think that's why, for me, being on the ground and looking at, okay, there's 100 rhino on this property. How do we secure them? Mm-hmm. How in Kruger Park can we better enable the rangers so that they're better protected? Body armor, night vision, the things that they
training,
need, right? Training, all of this. How do and then we can step back and say we can see that they're going to win the next firefight. We can see that there's an asymmetric element to their next engagement that gives them the advantage. It's a measurable, because now it's a war. It literally is a war. AK-47s, RPGs are entering these parks. And
you recently had some rangers here, right?
We did. Edge, for the first time in history, brought African rangers to train in the U.S.
That's amazing.
It was very cool.
How many rangers?
We brought, there were 8 guys who came over, part of a group of 22 special rangers in Kruger National Park. So these guys are going to go and kind of be leaders and continue the There'll be a downward effective training there to the others, and we hope to continue this. But they came over, and again, this is, we said, we've been working over there with them. Edge was founded to carry on the work that was going on with them. And we said, what do you want next? And they specifically said, can we go to the U.S.? We want them to train side by side with groups over there. We want them to see what it looks like. And then there were some other less predictable effects that came out of it. We actually went to the premiere in Glendale of the screening of the Strupp film, which these rangers were in partly.
Oh, okay.
And I talked to the head of that group afterwards, and I was surprised because one of the rangers next to me, who was, his demeanor's a little more of a badass. He's a little more quiet, a little more, there's this one moment where this rhino survived a poach, and her face is cut open, and they're putting a prosthetic face on her where they're literally screwing screws into her bone, and you can see tears coming out of her eyes, and the vet who's doing the work is crying, and I'm in the theater crying, and I look at the guy next to me and he's crying, this ranger. And afterwards I was talking to
I'm gonna cry right
their
now.
leader. It's brutal. And I told him I was really shocked to turn and see the guy next to me, and he says, one of the best things about this trip has been that they're going to see things through the eyes of the world, how important their work is. They had no idea. They show up and go to work every day.
Right.
They never get a break.
Right.
And they turned to us at the end and we talked about it, and they said, the way we had fundraisers, we had dinners, and the way people looked at them as if they were the world's greatest heroes.
They are.
They are. And what they do, I truly believe they do on behalf of all of humanity. Because if that animal dies on their watch, it's not just them. The animal in their park, that was a species that we all lost. So when they wake up and risk their life, when they go into a firefight to engage poachers, when they run into the bush and there's a buffalo and there's mambas and there's leopards and lions, what they risk every day to protect a species, that's not for them. That's not just for South African national parks or just for the continent. That's you and I. We benefit from that in a huge way.
I mean, I would say it's like for Mother Earth too. It's for us, yes, but it's also just for like nature, in honor of we're supposed to be stewards of this stuff, not, generally not what humans are known for, but that would be a nice tide that would turn as if we felt that way, I think. And is there corruption within anti-poaching?
Oh, there's corruption everywhere. There's too much money.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. It just seems like it would be so hard to, like you're talking about how these guys they would have to believe in their causes being something bigger, because I would imagine it would be so tempting to turn. Well,
I remember asking somebody one time about the Rangers, saying, and somebody said nobody's beyond corruption.
Right.
There's nobody who they won't attempt to recruit, and the money. Imagine, and it's the same. Like if you watch the show The Americans, like everybody can be turned. Pressures change. Somebody gets sick at home. You don't have the money to pay. Whatever formula may begin. Then somebody stands there with an amount of money you've never considered holding at once, or they pressure you, or they blackmail you. I mean, there's stories of guys in counter-poaching engagements coming up against family members. And guess who the family will side with? The one who's bringing home more money.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, but again, like, and I want to be careful not to say that I think any of the Rangers we worked with were specifically corruptible, but I want to say that having them come over and experience what they did in the U.S., like, I would like to say that there's an added nobility in their own minds to what they do.
Right.
Because you do it day in and day out. You don't think about what it means. Oh,
it just seems like a higher calling. Yeah.
Another carcass, another day. It's just another day at work.
Right.
So I think that the more that we can bring to the people on the ground a sense of
higher calling. Yeah.
And you're doing it for us. All the time we're over there and people will say, thank you so much for coming and doing this. Thank you. Thank you. And it's like the most absurd thing I ever hear, because I'm like,
it's like, thank the people who are doing it.
Like, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm getting on a plane and going home. Like, you don't get to rest.
Yeah.
I didn't risk my life coming over here. You risk your life tonight. So I feel like we are fortunate as an organization to be in a position where we can offer something. And I think that I don't think it's for everybody to get up and go join an organization and go over there and go do this, right? Everybody benefits, but I don't think it's for everybody. I think we were in the right place at the right time to do something effective. And the day that we are no longer able to offer anything, then we go home,
right?
Because we're not there for us. So yeah, I mean, you're right. The corruption is everywhere, but I think there's a lot of things you can do And that's where like the eyes of the world can come in and people will respond to that on the ground.
I always think of my very dear friend Henny from Egypt, who always used to say, you're only as loyal as your options.
Yeah.
And I do feel like all of us are, back someone into a corner enough, even no matter what their intentions might be, or if they're starving.
Yeah.
People do, it's survival.
Yeah.
You can convince yourself of a lot of things if you're trying to survive. It's interesting because I feel like there's this perception of, I mean, you say it's kind of imperialism, but there's also this like white savior kind of complex when it feels like Africa has always been that continent that we're like, we have to save it. And I wouldn't even, the culture is so different. I would imagine the only way to try and do anything effective is by working within the culture.
Sure.
And with the people on the ground and not coming in and saying, here's what we know about the problem and here's how you can fix it.
And you do, I mean, I look, my experience in doing this sort of thing is very limited, but you do have to strike a balance because we do have resources
that they don't have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in some cases that's knowledge. In some cases you do know how to do it better. You do have a cure for disease that they don't, and that's not just
you have more training and special ops or something.
I think as long as your mind is in the right place, like I never have a sense that, because we have this, it makes us somehow in any way superior. Like I said, we're not risking our lives or
have you ever been overnight, stayed overnight with them or been on the ground?
Sure.
I mean, what's the most terrifying experience you've had?
The most terrifying, there was getting charged by some lions once but that was more me being foolish. I will say the most terrifying moment I have had over there, it was very brief, but so there is one thing over there that scares me more than anything else. It's the black mamba. Leopards can be scary. You go jogging sometimes in areas of leopards, like they're a ninja. You'll never see them coming. Lions are scary just because they're that powerful. Someone else charged, elephants can be scary. There's a lot of stuff that can kill you, but there's nothing. I say God made the earth in 7 days. When he rested, the devil made the mamba. That's what I truly believe. That animal is terrifying. It lost nothing. And normally it's venomous, but it's delicate. It's this, but it's slow. Mamba lost nothing. They 10 feet long. They're massive around. They can stand 40% of their body off the ground. If you get bit by one, you're told, you find the biggest tree with the most shade and a good view, because that's where it ends. So we were doing this thing fairly recently where we wanted to do a test run of how counter-poaching teams react in this one area. And basically like, all right, if there's a poach that's happened or a crime that's happened, let's see how you catch them. Canine tracking teams, perimeters, like all this stuff. So I volunteered with one of the other local guys. We're going to pretend to be the poachers. We're going to create a spoor, like a track. We're going to go run. And so then we gave them like an hour to start coming after us. So this guy and I split up, and then I put socks over my boots to hide the footprints, which is one of their tactics. And then one of the first things I did was there was kind of a little dirt road that I ran up to the side of it and jumped over it to land on the other side to conceal my footprints over the road, thinking I was being, clever. When I landed on the other side, I took a step, and there was a mamba that was about as big around as like my upper arm. And I probably missed landing on him by 6 inches, and he just shoo. And there's no mistaking what it was. No, and I think I ran for 30 minutes at like Olympic speed after that with pure adrenaline. But coming that close to one, that's like probably the most I've ever sort of felt
terror.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of things we like, and I don't know. Maybe I'm missing, the. I'll be over and there's people even we're working with who will be nervous. I usually just feel a thrill.
Yeah,
like I am like, oh, here we are under the stars and night vision. There's lions around. Like, it's scary, but maybe I just don't have a healthy enough fear for it. I've been downrange for some, bullets flying before and, felt that cold chill, but I'm not a combat veteran like some of the guys we work with, so that I don't have some of that in my DNA. But that moment is probably the one that like was the biggest sort of reality check moment. Cross yourself and run.
Is there danger in having an organization like yours with so much corruption? I mean, I imagine it's probably within the ranks of the government and all. Its tentacles are probably everywhere.
Well, it's certainly improved in South Africa specifically since Zuma left and Ramaphosa's come in. That is, the corruption is improved. But you're right, it is everywhere. We have worked some with the Banyan Risk Group, which is a really high-end international security firm, to do some education for us. I don't think, we're there's no specific threats that we are that wary of, but we are cautious. We're cautious when we post. We're cautious to not go around shouting that we're here to stop poaching. Absolutely, somebody at some point will come after us or will, but I don't feel like we're in a lot of danger, but I do think you take some very reasonable precautions. Yeah, we've had a couple moments where, is that guy following us, that guy looking, are they just looking to steal passports, or are they, and then, every country is different, right? You had incredible corruption recently in Zimbabwe, where literally you've got heads of state who are helping smuggle things. You've got,
wow.
Yeah. So but there's also really, really good people on the ground over there.
Right.
There's devoted people who give their life to this and care about animals. And I think we should be very grateful for those people and recognize that they're there, not just the, corrupt lunatics.
I'm looking for the questions that you have.
Questions. Is there any questions purely in emoji?
One of the questions that somebody asked was how you feel about the recent loosening of the anti-poaching laws in Botswana. That was the way it was worded. I don't know if that's...
So, there's currently a bit of a storm about anti-hunting laws and restrictions, and it's very politically charged. We as an organization don't want to get too deep into this, but there's certainly some very stark differences between what, for example, American media are saying, what people on the ground are saying.
Right.
Including like some of the top elephant conservationists over there, very pro big game hunting, recognize the need and the value of the money that comes in. I mean, I guess a couple of things I'd say is that one, so Botswana last year, this started to explode because it got out that there were about 90 elephants killed in a national park there in a weekend.
Right.
Poached. The reality of that is way more complicated than how it was advertised. And let me be diplomatic here and careful about how I present this. But basically, you can look at Yellowstone as a model to understand some of this. But pressure from the community outside world, basically led Botswana to start outlawing hunting,
right,
including elephant culling hunting and all this. And hunting is a part of that ecosystem. Like I said, elephants are overcrowded. So, say what you will about whether it shouldn't, but just recognizing this reality. But then Botswana, for example, has a couple of problems. One is they don't have the revenue coming in. They also have an elephant overcrowding problem.
Right.
So in that specific case, they said, or what seems to have happened is that rather than figure out how to solve it, because they caved to the Western pressures, saying no more hunting, don't do this. Okay. Because they want to keep getting the money from the Western NGOs, right? They don't want to piss them off. And then they sent their security home for a weekend because they said, now we have an overcrowding problem. Poachers come in and kill. Now they can fundraise off of we have a poaching problem. They can get more money from the Western NGOs. So there's this sort of cycle that's happening there. And so what you're seeing now from several countries is some pushback against Western groups coming in telling us how to manage our wildlife. We're getting sick of it. We kept doing it, but it's like more difficult for us to just take the money. We're going to kind of do it our way. So they're hiring PR firms and other things so that they can have it both ways. They can get the money, but they can also manage wildlife in the way that they need to. Now, again, like I'm not saying that there's two wrongs making a right here. I'm not saying, but I am recognizing that, this is a part of wildlife management, right? It's preservation versus conservation, for example. Now, say that you have an area where you're going to allow big game hunting and elephants have to be culled, and you allow, some wealthy Brit
Donnie
Jr. To come over and give a $500,000, pay for a $500,000 tag to kill an elephant,
right? Because
you've got too many elephants. Okay. So on the ground, you see why that's so valuable to them. We got too many elephants. We've got enough money to pay our staff for a year from one rich white, coming over. There's actually an excellent Radiolab episode called The Rhino Hunter that I'd recommend people listen to, which helps show that there are two sides to this coin. So the issue with that, and one of the things that Edge is invested in addressing in a really big way, is a program to study elephant genetics. Because so you used to have the big tuskers, right? The elephants that tusk go all the way to the ground, like Matt. So they've got a history of big tuskers in Kruger National Park, as well as in the Maasai in Kenya. but there's very few of them left. I think there's 7 with another maybe 12 could be tuskers and Kruger, could be off about those numbers. And part of the reason is that when a big game hunter comes in, what do they want?
Right.
Biggest, best trophy, which you've now removed from the gene pool, the biggest, best expression of genes. So we are behind research that we're looking for more funding for right now, which studies the elephant genetic map over multiple countries to, one, see where the big tusker gene is, to see, but also to just understand what you're removing from the gene pool when you do that.
Right.
And if you're going to move elephants instead of shoot them, for example, you can't just move them that easily. Elephants have very specific genetics unique to the migratory patterns, and their elephants are very careful not to inbreed.
Right.
So they move great distances so that there's no inbreeding. So, if you are going to allow it, like, I think that this research that we're doing is something that's very necessary, because we have lost the big tuskers, or we're close to losing them.
Right.
And it's not just about that, but that's a nice epitomic expression of, we don't know what we're losing,
right?
When we allow for indiscriminate hunting. So financially, you can understand why it's a benefit and why it's, to many to be necessary. And then on the whole, look, the hunting community brings more money to the continent and to wildlife conservation in general than any other group, hands
interesting.
down. They're just partly because they tend to be a group that likes to get out and appreciate the wild, partly because of things like this, paying for tags. And obviously not all hunting in Africa is big game hunting. There's hunting for antelope and things, and there's those who give the meat to the local communities and all of that. But I do think that we need to have a better sense of how this is happening if we are going to allow it to happen.
Yeah.
So again,
it's such an interesting perspective you just don't think about. It's because I think in the, like you were saying, in the perception, it's just like, white hunter in Africa, bad.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah,
We don't think about, maybe they bring money, maybe there are animals that need to be hunted, maybe or are overpopulated, maybe there's just no other exploration of this topic other than a knee-jerk reaction of like, I saw an elephant that was killed, that affects me emotionally, this is bad.
Yeah. And I do, and by the way, I'm not saying I don't have an emotional reaction to that.
Of course.
Elephants are magnificent, but we are part of nature. We're part of that ecosystem. And we can't sort of, again, like, come over, that these countries are giving pushback. Stop telling us what we can't do. If you're, and I would say, if you're an NGO or if you're a person who goes over and say, don't do this, well, you better give them an alternative, right? Because the options are limited. So I'm all for, like I said, animal ambassadorships and other options that allow, an elephant that would be culled to become an ambassador of the species, but it's just not that simple. And that's where, like, we can't be imperialistic. So yeah, you are right now seeing some serious pushback. They're lobbying. These countries really want Trump to lift the ban. So he lifted the ban on elephant and other big game import trophies. Then under pressure, he reinstated the ban. And now these countries are lobbying, please lift the ban again. So
interesting.
So again, like,
wait, so there's a ban on
the import of elephant trophies. So if you go
into America,
correct?
Okay,
and
so they're asking for him to lift the ban so that they can conserve in the way that they can manage this in a way that they feel is
and that they can make money off of it,
right?
So and when I say they, I mean, I'm not trying to say everybody, but you are seeing pushback at the national level from several countries who are kind of saying, stop telling us what to do.
Right.
Here's what we're doing. So, and that's where, all right, let's go over there and work with them, not against them. And I think they go over there with an instant to get anything done. So I would say this research we're behind, I think, has a potential to help in a way that a lot of other groups come over and say, do this, don't do this. Okay, well, here's something we're offering. We're gonna work at the level that this already exists. So in that way, we're more pragmatic, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm also, let me just disclaim, I'm far from an expert in this. This comes from few conversations that I have when I'm over there, and I definitely don't want to say I'm speaking for everybody over there says this, or everybody we work with. But I do know that the way I hear it represented here, I'm saying, well, you haven't talked to anybody over there.
She always knows when Hope is here, folks. Everyone's like, is Hope going to make an appearance on the podcast? Because she knows exactly when it's 1 hour. She's like, it's 59 minutes. And she's like, all right, I'm done listening to you two. I always ask the same 2 questions at the end of every podcast of my guests. What is your biggest defective character that you have to kind of work against in your daily life? Hope. Stop it.
Okay.
I know it's not an easy one.
Well, you just spring it on me like
I
that.
know, I love it.
With almost no defects. I'm gonna have to dig. But the biggest character defect that I have to work against. Well, I mean, I guess there's personal and professional.
Right.
So in terms of like running this organization, I don't know. This is gonna sound egotistical to say I'm not a details person, so I can get like lost at the top level, and I need detail support. But I wouldn't say that's a defect. I personally, I certainly I tend towards addiction, which I see expressed in a lot of different things.
This is why you don't have the healthy sense of fear.
Interesting. I haven't drawn that connection, but
it's very common.
Is it?
They always say you can't scare an alcoholic.
Well, I don't think
Not that you're an alcoholic.
Right.
I mean, it's a. I think if you're like an adrenaline junkie, they're all very much related. Adrenaline junkies and addictive personalities, and I've found, just from my own observation, I would say that characteristic is very of being kind of stupidly fearless.
Yeah.
Is when you say something like, "Oh, I tend towards like being addictive." That I would say those two things are very much related a lot of the time.
Interesting. Well, I'm
not an expert. That's just my opinion from observing hundreds and thousands of addicts over time.
Right. I can see that being true. So yeah, I mean, I would say that that's certainly something that I don't specifically mean like, substances, this and that, but just that it's something that manifests in sort of not finding balance in certain things sometimes. And then, oh gosh, I don't know. I'm incredibly disorganized sometimes, and I can be, very manically focused on something to the detriment of other things. So yeah, maybe that's as soul bearing as I want to get on,
of course,
without any forethought.
What's your greatest strength? This is where we end on the positive note.
Greatest strength. Well, I will speak only in regards to building, something that has professional bearing and building a nonprofit. I think my greatest strength is just that I have a lot of energy to put in this. I get up at 3:30 a.m. and I'm down, I just never stop pushing on it, which what I'm finding is in building an organization, like starting any business, that's one of the greatest assets you can bring to the table is just constant pressure. And, you're the champion, and everybody else, I'm a leader now. There's other people. We have an incredible team of people who are working with us now, like really, really great people. And I can see that they sort of take cues from the energy that I put into it. So it's not something that it comes from the passion and not wanting to disappoint people, but it's not something that I have a lot of discernment in applying, but it's just there. So I certainly know that that's of value at the top, and that's probably as egotistical as I'll get with without any forethought. So
thank you. And I just want to reiterate that I was not implying that you were an alcoholic. I don't know about like your substances. I just don't want to. I just mean addictive personalities in general, and like you said, they can manifest even in work.
Sure.
Like I don't drink anymore, but I'm addictive in my behavior when it comes to work. 100%. I can be very manic, like obsessively focused, and not. Meanwhile, my life around me will fall apart a little bit. Yeah. So
I'm very much that way with work, and I think that we can have a whole other hour talking about addiction, but
it's like whack-a-mole.
Yeah, it is. But I also think that that addiction has been given an unfair sort of binary value.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it's like it manifests in a whole lot of ways.
Yeah.
The number 2 at McDonald's. It can be binge watching shows, and it can be exercise.
Yeah.
It's
and I don't think it's all bad. I always say too. I have this kind of thought that would we have a lot of the great artists of our time had we had medication for like bipolar disorder back then? I wonder.
Yeah.
Because I think it is a lot of them if you look back.
Well, one of my greatest idols, Michael Crichton, I think he's one of the greatest geniuses of our time. He was also married 5 times.
Right.
Or divorced 5 times, whichever it was.
Right.
So, there is a cost to these qualities, but yeah, anyway, we'll talk about that next time.
All right. Well, I would love to have you back and hear about what's going on and keep us updated. And where can we support your organization?
Yeah, so, you can find us online, ecodefensegroup.org. We're at Ecodefense Group on all social media platforms. And you can see ways to donate, ways to get involved, T-shirts you can buy. This shirt saved a rhino shirt.
Do you have like a monthly subscription?
We have on our website, if you click give today, then you can choose to make your contribution monthly. It's a huge wind beneath our wings when you do that.
I think that's the one I need to sign up for.
Yeah, we'd love it. I mean, everything that lets us know, gives us some guarantee of what comes in the next month.
Yeah.
And then, we've got some pretty cool initiatives. We didn't even talk about it, but we just brought the one of the most famous skydivers in the world, Red Bull Air Force skydiver Jeff Provenzano, just came over, jumped out of a hot air balloon on a bunch of rhinos, putting out a little video about that.
And his little squirrel suit.
Yeah, he sounds like a rocket when he was coming down, but he's that was a whole thing. And then you can go listen to our podcast, the Edge Conservation Podcast, which will hook back into our stuff. So
I want to go over.
You're more than welcome to come over. We'd love to have you. I think you should go over there and do some episodes with people on the ground.
That would be amazing. Yeah. And it would be a great piece to write.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm surprised that you didn't get more coverage when the Rangers were here, but I just don't think many people are aware. There's just so much noise.
Yeah. Well, we're growing, both in terms of our public image and, which we're careful about. We don't throw it all out there, but
right.
Your pal Joe Rogan has tweeted about us a couple times. We've got the eyes of some interesting people, but we also manage it carefully. With the Rangers, we put out a little press release. We have a PR person now. We didn't then, but I don't know that it was something we didn't really want to advertise it in a huge way.
Right.
We want them to get a lot of credit.
Right.
But as far as them, but that was an interesting thing for us. Like, all right, how much do we expose this?
Right.
And, we're still kind of navigating that. But I think our community efforts with the photography clubs, which is an awesome initiative I'm so excited about now. We're hoping to get Leica involved and some other groups. That's something we can advertise all day long.
Right.
Red Bull guy jumping out. And then when we're kind of a little bit like, remember the first X-Men movie when he says, the above ground is the school, but below ground is an entirely different matter. And he takes Wolverine down. It's kind of how we are. We have the school up top, and then below ground, we're doing some stuff that maybe we can't advertise as much. But anyway, look, there's lots. We would love to have you over. I think you should pitch the story. I think you should come over, enjoy some braais, and have some adventures of your own. Yeah.
Thank you for coming and talking about this, and thank you for your work. It is so important. And I think this conversation, if anything else, you gave us a lot of resources to also go explore, because now I'm down the rabbit hole.
I keep digging and join us. This is not conservation is a global effort.
Yeah, it's so cool. Thank you. It's time for the weekly check-in with Bridget and cousin Maggie.
We are recording. Is this just going to be the check-in?
That's all.
Bridget making mouth noises.
Mouth noises.
She's distracted at the moment.
Somebody wrote about being politically homeless, and I just got sent.
How dare they? All right, we'll put it aside for the moment.
How dare you people who are not as lazy as I am?
How dare you be productive?
How dare you productive people jumping on my wheelhouse while I lay around doing interviews with famous people? How dare you? I don't have the hot takes in me anymore.
Are you all burned out after like 3 months?
How have people been doing this for like years? When I was interviewing Mitchell today, he said, when did you start writing, for money online? And I was like, 2015. And he's been doing it since he's 27, but he's been doing it for Vice since he was like 20.
Wow. This is Mitchell
Sunderland.
Mm-hmm. So he'll be coming out in a few weeks.
But he's a youngin', and yeah, we were talking about, I've basically really only been getting dragged online for like 3 years. And I'm already like, I've had enough.
You're still a newbie.
I'm basically not even a junior in high school on the online world.
That's adorable.
It's sad but true. No wonder everyone hates me.
It reminds me of you in high school, where you just like partied like a senior ever since you were a sophomore.
Ever since I was a freshman. And then everyone was like, who is this bitch? I hate her.
Running all our parties.
Who is she? Running the keg?
Running the keg. That's right. Do you remember that?
When I went with your
I,
sister?
Bridget and I was a sophomore.
Well,
It was
Oh,
when
that
you were-
was the first adventure
we ever went
Retards
on.
galore.
That was
Our Retards galore was the first. It was the first. We just didn't know where we were going.
well,
apparently.
okay. So we were going to visit my sister in college. I was a sophomore in high school, and Bridget was a senior. And you were driving your little stick shift car.
because I come from the generation that knows how to do that.
Right. But we just were idiots and driving.
We were listening to music and having a grand old
we
time.
were, and then realized we were headed in the wrong direction.
I was like, "Where you are I?"
And then all of a sudden I realized the ocean was on the wrong side and we were heading south when we should be heading north.
And you were like, "What? Where are we? We should have
We're
been
in
here.
Kingston. What's
You
going
are
on?"
I.
So
Well, I also thought your little cottage that you guys went to every single summer was in Maine, and found out it was like
at literally a half hour away from where I live. Anyway, we go, but a few weeks, like the week before, I had gone to a party with Bridget. It was like a townie party. And I had never been to one, I don't think. It was like
You're so sheltered.
I know, so sheltered.
Townie
And-
parties are the best.
And so you took me to one, and we were in like somebody's basement, and and this guy just over and over again kept repeating, "I've been drinking since the second grade.
Oh God, that was the
I've been bumping
greatest
since
party
the second
ever.
grade." And it was just like the refrain of the night was, "I've been drinking since the second grade." And so then we go to this college party that my sister, who's like a freshman in college, takes us to. And at some point in the night, Bridget winds up on the keg
I was pouring everyone's beers.
and was pouring the beers and was like, "I've been drinking since the second grade. I've been bumping since the second grade." And then she became known as like, they were like, "Oh yeah, your cousin. Wasn't she the girl who was running the keg last night?"
Isn't she the girl that's been drinking since the second grade?
She became a little bit infamous in my sister's circle of friends.
I believe I did a keg stand that night too. Can't be quite sure.
Yeah, that was our first ever road trip.
Oh God, I still use that phrase to this day.
I know, me too. It's quite catchy.
I've been drinking since the second grade.
I've been bumping since the second grade.
God bless the townies
Uh-huh.
of America.
Uh-huh.
Townies of America unite.
We will take our country back.
I think they did.
I think they
actually.
did, too. The last election.
think that's MAGA. Make townies great again.
I've been drinking since the second grade. Will be their
been
rallying cry.
that should be their new slogan.
Oh, yeah.
Oh gosh.
Good times.
God, we
Good
were young
times.
too. I must have been like 18.
I was 15.
Oh, so I was like
No,
17.
Yeah, I was a sophomore. I was 15. I don't
No,
even
I
think
was
I
a
had
senior.
my license yet. Yeah, you were a senior, but you turned 18 when?
No, in November.
In November. So I think
I
it was
had just
before
turned.
November. I think we went in
Oh yeah,
like
because we went for
October.
her birthday.
So you went.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, right when she first
I think
started.
it was her birthday. Yeah.
So it was like,
Or it was around then. It was.
yeah,
it
you
was
were
definitely
17
fall.
and I was 15.
I mean, I pretty much
You were
had
running the keg.
I pretty much at a party where there were like seniors there. I pretty much had been drinking since the second
You
grade.
really
at that
had been.
point.
You had much more experience than any of those people at that party. I
Oh
can pretty
man,
much guarantee.
freshmen in college. When I went to college my freshman year, I was like, "This is fucking amateur hour." Jesus, I'd been
You
drinking,
people have never done your laundry.
and they'd never drank really because they had parents that watched them,
Uh-huh.
and it was embarrassing.
It was, yeah. Well, you guys would steal your dad's car before you had your license
Yeah,
when you were like 15 and would go
I was drinking and driving before I could legally drive.
let alone drink.
Years before I could drink. Yeah, we would take it in the middle of the night and go to townie parties.
Go to townie parties. I was home in bed asleep while my parents kept a close eye on us.
My sister and I still die laughing at like how we would put the car in neutral and then push it so that it didn't make any noise out of the driveway and have to like jump in it and start it.
Oh my God.
Like throw it into drive and start it once we got it far enough away from the house. It's a miracle we lived.
I know. And wasn't our other cousin always with you guys? And she was like, and your sister was like 13.
None of us had any parents.
And they were both like 13 years old, and sometimes they would drive, wouldn't they? Or was it always you driving?
No. It was pretty much me.
Pretty much always Bridget. The instigator.
I corrupted a lot of people. But the good news is, I remember one time, well, now I'm inspiring everyone to get sober, but it's only natural because I was the one that got them all drunk and high. But one time I showed up in Vegas. And I walked into this hotel room and I was with my best friend from high school. And we walked into this hotel room and the guys in the hotel are like, well, if it isn't the girl who got me high for the first time. And I didn't even remember it. I was like, how many people did I corrupt out there?
You got a lot of people high for the first time. I can guarantee you. I would love to see a show of hands as to who got high their first time with you. Because I'm pretty much sure it's many hundreds of people.
I had this little bat, like a little one hit. They little fake metal ones that look like cigarettes.
Yeah.
And I was obsessed with it, and I called it Pinchy. And I would drop it. And he always was dropping it because I was always drunk. And I would be like, Pinchy, Pinchy, Pinchy. And it would just be on the floor, but no matter where I was, I'd have this over dramatic reaction to dropping Pinchy.
Oh,
and that was another one that
went
stuck
on for years.
Sometimes when I miss smoking weed, it's the stuff like that I miss the most.
Sometimes she'll still cry, Pinchy, Pinchy.
I remember one time we were on this deck and I dropped it, and this is when it started though, the Pinchy. Is because it fell through the cracks of the deck down underneath the deck, and it took me like 2 hours to find it. And I was down there just laughing my butt off with my friend searching for Pinchy. I finally found it.
I love how if you thought you called enough to it that it would reappear in front of you.
Pinchy!
Pinchy! Pinchy! Pinchy!
We have the dumbest jokes, and I apologize for anyone listening, but now you're in on all of our inside jokes.
I've been drinking since the second grade.
Tards galore. I've been drinking since the second grade. Pinchy? Pinchy! I really miss that thing. If I ever start smoking weed again, it's going to be just for that reason alone. So I can hopelessly search for my long lost Pinchy every party I go to. It was just an ongoing theme. Well, guys,
that's all we have for you tonight.
I hope you enjoyed our
trip down memory
lane, which is frankly quite a miracle. I have a memory at all.
Right.
We'd like to thank our sponsor this week, Phetasy.com. I feel like Kanye right now. Tune in next week for another riveting episode that will change your life, help you get out of your own way, and solve all the world's problems. I want to thank our composer, Jared Elias, my co-producer and cousin, Maggie, and all of you out there listening. This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.